In my search for wisdom, I came across a fascinating book tucked away in the more hidden corners of arcane, or what is often called occult knowledge. This extensive work was written by Albert Pike, an American author, poet, lawyer, military general, and Freemason. The book, titled Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, or more simply Morals and Dogma, is a dense text of esoteric philosophy, published by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite's Southern Jurisdiction in the United States. It contains 32 chapters, each corresponding to one of the degrees of the Southern Jurisdiction, excluding the final honorary degree. In this video, we'll be exploring the philosophy behind the very first degree in the system, the Apprentice. Uncontrolled or poorly directed power does not build, it destroys. Like gunpowder ignited in open air or steam uncontained by mechanism, it dissipates into nothingness or turns destructively upon itself. Without aim or restraint, it flails wildly, striking at shadows, and inflicts injury on its own origin. This is not creation, it is upheaval, disaster, and collapse. It is a volcanic eruption, a tremor that shatters foundations, a windstorm that tears apart. It is blind and furious, like the one-eyed giant lashing out into darkness, toppling under the force of his own misdirected fury. The raw power of the masses is much the same, immense, but requiring careful use and wise direction. As with steam that can either twist steel into weapons or spin the finest threads of fabric, this force must be controlled through thought and guided by insight. Reason is to this collective strength what the compass is to the vessel, its guiding soul, steering its heavy bulk across uncertain waters toward a fixed and noble direction. To confront the towering walls of oppression, ignorance, and superstition that have been erected through the ages against human dignity, this power must be disciplined and enlightened. Only then do its acts of courage leave a lasting mark. Only then is true advancement possible. Only then are victories achieved that elevate the human condition. Mind must animate might. Philosophy must not drift in abstraction. It must act, must move, must serve as a transformative current aimed at human betterment. Truth and compassion are the twin engines of this transformation. When strength is shaped by thought, aimed by purpose, and measured by what is just and fair, when it moves in coordination with intent and structure, then the long-awaited transformation of the world will finally rise and walk. For even divine power exists in perfect harmony with divine understanding. And from that balance, only order and peace can arise. It is the absence of this balance that causes revolutions to wither. Too often do uprisings, born from the lofty summits of human ideals, justice, wisdom, reason, righteousness, descend into chaos. Like rivers that begin in the clearest heights, gathering the reflections of the heavens and fed by countless streams, they set out with grandeur but vanish in wastelands, swallowed by the barrenness of the earth. The progress of humanity needs these high places to blaze forth examples of unwavering courage. Heroic acts capture the spirit of history and serve as beacons to guide generations. They are lightning flares from the vast storm of potential that lives in the people. To endure hardship, to dare greatly, to risk all, to meet adversity with defiance, to remain faithful to principle, to wrestle with fate without retreat, to face tyranny without fear and stand firm even in the face of victory drunk with arrogance. These are the kind of acts that inspire nations and awaken their hearts. Yet beneath the visible world lies another realm, hidden in the shadows of society, where despair, decay, and vice ferment in silence, deep beneath the surface of civilization. It is a realm where selfishness reigns, where each soul scrambles for its own survival. Ideals hold no sway there, and progress is a forgotten word. This forgotten multitude, formed by the offspring of ignorance and misery, has only one instinct, to satisfy hunger. They do not dream, they only endure, and still, even here, there is potential. The dust beneath our feet, if placed in the crucible, refined by fire, can be made to shine with brilliance. So too may these lives, shaped by the flame of transformation, be turned toward the light. The strength of the people may be rough and blunt like a hammer, but when their power is directed within the boundaries set by careful judgment and thoughtful guidance, their strikes can serve a greater purpose. And yet, it is this very energy, the immense, almost mythic strength of the masses, that so often ends up constructing the very fortresses of tyranny. It becomes the engine behind the armies of despots. This is why such regimes arise, those marked not only by cruelty but by a certain rottenness, where civility festers and the moral collapse of the oppressed mirrors the deformity of their rulers. The corruption of conscience becomes pervasive. A stench rises not just from the tyrant's actions, but from the crowd that mirrors his decay. When power rots, the people beneath it shrink in dignity, and authority grows sick with the reflection of its own filth. It is the collective force of the people that props up all regimes, noble or vile. That force flows through militaries, which often act more to suppress than to liberate. Tyranny takes hold of this power and molds it into its instrument. Force becomes a weapon hung from the belt of kings and bishops alike. Submissive strength props up thrones and oligarchies, from imperial courts to senatorial councils. Military might, when wielded by oppression, is simply masked impotence in disguise. Thus, humanity is turned against itself, made to fight its own cause unknowingly. A people will endure chains, its laborers tolerate insult, and its soldiers accept the lash, until the moment comes when a lost battle becomes a step forward. Less pomp may mean more freedom. When the drums fall silent, the voice of reason can sometimes be heard. Tyrants harness the people's own might to subdue them, yoking them like oxen, steering them where they will. Liberty and progress are trampled under marching boots, and truth is drowned beneath the roar of cannons. Monks march beside soldiers, and the church sings hymns of victory, not over evil, but over disobedience. Whenever military force is no longer answerable to civil law, whenever the hammer acts without a guiding rule, tyranny is born in full armor, as sudden and complete as the goddess springing from her divine parent. It seeds new dynasties and begins its decline almost from the moment of its birth. Today, such rule seems to start at the point where earlier tyrannies used to fall. Time and again, the people expend massive effort, only to end in futility. Their power is wasted preserving what ought to have long passed, outdated beliefs propped up by sheer momentum, crumbling dogmas polished to seem divine, empty symbols revered as sacred truth, and relics of a dead past bound like chains to the living present. This is one of humanity's constant tragedies, its endless combat with illusions, fanaticisms, deceptions, and the stale routines of oppression. Old tyrannies, seen through the veil of nostalgia, often gain an air of dignity, just as a jagged mountain seen from afar appears smooth and serene. But the mere sight of a single prison built by tyranny is worth more in awakening righteous anger and directing force rightly than the most eloquent writings. France ought to have preserved the Bastille as a lasting warning. Italy should have kept the cells of the Inquisition intact. The people's own strength once raised those walls and locked the living behind stone. Uncontrolled or impulsive, the people's force cannot sustain a free government. That energy must be shaped, channeled, and divided wisely into distinct paths, so that it may emerge not as chaos, but as deliberate law, thoughtful action, and rightful decision. Just as ancient rulers of the Nile redirected the river's floodwaters through careful channels to bring fertility instead of ruin, so must public strength be governed by principles and structures. Without them, without a constitution, without a guiding law, power becomes destructive. Like a great hammer loosed from its frame, striking blindly, shattering the mechanisms around it, it eventually falls still, a broken tool amid the wreckage it created. The power of the people, when set into motion and shaped by the collective will, is like the gavel, strong, decisive, and capable of building. But this force must act under the guidance of law and order, symbolized not by chaos, but by the guiding rule of wisdom. When this harmony is achieved, the fruits are liberty, equality, and fraternity, freedom that respects law, equal rights upheld by justice, and a brotherhood built not only on shared benefits but on mutual responsibility. Within this framework, symbols like the rough and perfect ashlar take on deeper meaning. The rough ashlar, crude and unformed, represents the people in their unorganized and raw state. The perfect ashlar, refined by the skill of the workman and the discipline of the tools, is the symbol of the well-formed state, one shaped by the consent of its citizens, where laws and government arise from the people's will and are balanced in harmony. Imagine a cube, drawn out to show its structure, part of it visible, the rest concealed. The visible portion reflects the workings of government, the executive that enforces, the legislature that creates, and the judiciary that interprets. The hidden sides, unseen but vital, embody the spirit of the nation, its liberty, its equality, and its fraternity. Together, these form the soul and structure of a society built from the rough substance of the people, molded through strength and measured by the principles of justice. Masonry, though not a religion, includes prayer as a vital element, an expression of the soul's longing for what lies beyond understanding. Prayer is the soul reaching toward the eternal intelligence, clumsily named the architect, a being too vast for names. Within every person is a compass, conscience, guiding us through the vast unknown. Thought, reflection, and prayer are the means by which our inner selves point toward the light beyond the veil. This connection, this yearning, is not superstition but a form of spiritual magnetism. To dismiss prayer as useless because it does not change divine will is to misunderstand its nature. The divine works through natural and human forces, our thoughts, our choices, our actions. Even if destiny is fixed, our efforts remain our own. Just as we do not stop striving for health or happiness because outcomes may be beyond us, we also do not cease to pray. Will is a force, so is thought. Prayer, too, is a force, perhaps mysterious, but no less real. It works in the same unseen way as faith and love, which shape our lives and actions. Prayer, when offered sincerely, is a noble expression of the human spirit. To reject it is to deny the very forces that move us forward. Every word we speak, every act of will, leaves an imprint, echoing through time, shaping the world in ways we may never fully grasp. Every lodge represents a temple, and both in structure and design it is rich with symbolism. The very concept of a temple takes its form from the universe itself, which served as the original blueprint for humanity's sacred spaces. The design of Solomon's temple, its symbolic features, and the garments of the high priest were all reflections of the perceived cosmic order. Within the temple could be found signs of the changing seasons, emblems of the sun and moon, celestial bodies, stars, and the constellations like the Great and Little Bear, along with symbols of the elements and the known world. The guiding presence in this symbolic lodge is Hermes, master of the cosmic temple, represented by Kurum, one of the lights that illuminate the lodge. Deeper meanings behind these heavenly signs, sacred patterns, and architectural details will be revealed gradually as one progresses through the craft. Until then, the thoughtful mind is encouraged to study and explore these mysteries independently. To interpret the symbols of the universe is to read the divine language and peer into the mind of the Creator. According to their catechism, as Pike calls it here, a lodge is understood as an assembly of Freemasons, lawfully gathered, possessing the sacred writings, the square and compass, and the official authority to work. This lodge is said to rest upon three great pillars: wisdom, strength, and beauty, represented respectively by the Master, Senior Warden, and Junior Warden. These pillars are symbolic because wisdom, strength, and beauty are the essential qualities of all enduring things. One tradition explains this by stating that any noble work must have wisdom to plan it, strength to sustain it, and beauty to complete and refine it. As the Apostle once wrote, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? If anyone defiles this temple, him shall God destroy, for the temple of God is holy, which you are." Within the divine nature, wisdom and power exist in perfect balance. The laws that govern the physical and moral world are not arbitrary commands of supreme will, because if they were, they could be reversed. Order would collapse into chaos, and what is now good could be deemed evil. But divine laws are not righteous simply because they are commanded. They are commanded because they are righteous. They are the expressions of infinite wisdom, not mere acts of unbound power. From the balance between limitless intellect and limitless force arises universal harmony, both in the physical realm and in the moral order. This triad, wisdom, power, and harmony, is deeply rooted in Masonic teaching. These ideas also point toward deeper truths that may be uncovered in time. Even in a basic explanation, one sees the wisdom of the master architect in harmonizing strength and grace, whether in the structure of a tree, the human body, the form of an egg, or the geometric perfection of the honeycomb. In each, power is matched by symmetry, proportion, and elegance. So it is with great speakers or poets, who blend energy and clarity with rhythm, imagery, and imaginative light. And in the body of the state, the raw force of the people, whether in labor or defense, must unite with the refinement of intellect, the beauty of culture, and the cultivation of the arts and sciences, if true greatness and authentic freedom are to be achieved. In all things divine, material, and human, harmony is the offspring of balance, the dynamic tension and unity of opposites, held together by a singular, sovereign wisdom. The most profound riddles are found in this tension: how to reconcile the moral law with divine authority, human choice with predestined power, and the presence of evil with divine wisdom, goodness, and mercy. These are the ancient mysteries posed by the Sphinx. You pass between two great pillars upon entering the lodge, symbols of the ancient columns that once stood at the entrance of the temple, flanking its eastern gateway. Cast in bronze and substantial in form, these columns, as described in sacred texts and traditional records, were massive and richly adorned. Their shafts rose high, crowned with elaborate capitals shaped in the likeness of the seed vessel of the lotus or Egyptian lily, a sacred emblem in both Hindu and Egyptian traditions. These capitals were decorated with pomegranates, woven bronze work, and wreaths, reflecting both beauty and spiritual symbolism. One of these pillars, placed on the right or southern side, bore the name commonly rendered as Jachin, while the one on the left was called Boaz. The traditional interpretation of these names tells us that Jachin signifies he who establishes, or he who makes firm, drawn from the Hebrew root suggesting standing upright, strength, and support. It implies an active, life-giving force. Boaz, in contrast, carries meanings such as strength, might, refuge, and stability, deriving from a root that suggests permanence and firmness. Together, these names reflect a balance between active energy and enduring power, foundations not only of architecture but of all sacred undertakings. According to the customs of the York Rite, it is usual to see atop these pillars two globes, one celestial and one terrestrial. However, these are later additions, not found in the original temple imagery. The columns themselves were modeled by Kuram, the artisan from Tyre, after those that stood before the temple of Morkarth, dedicated to the elements of wind and fire, elements that signify divine forces in nature. In the lodge, entered apprentices symbolically store their tools in the pillar Jachin, which emphasizes its role as the place of establishment, work, and forward motion. The deeper symbolic meaning of these columns is left for further stages of instruction, as the understanding of their full import grows with one's advancement. Regarding the dimensions of the lodge, it is said that they are boundless, reaching outward with no limits, and its ceiling is none other than the heavens themselves. This reflects a teaching of continual aspiration. The mind of the Mason is always directed upward, toward the divine. This ideal is poetically represented by a ladder resting on the earth and extending toward the skies, like the vision of Jacob, who saw angels ascending and descending its rungs. This mystical ladder, often shown with multiple levels, is now commonly illustrated with three central virtues: faith, hope, and charity, urging the Mason to believe in the divine, to hope in the promise of eternal life, and to practice universal love. While this particular threefold interpretation is of more recent origin and doesn't align with older symbolism, it nonetheless serves as a reminder of moral aspiration. In earlier times, the symbolism focused on the celestial order. The ancients recognized 7 moving lights in the heavens: the moon, Mercury, Venus, the sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. These 7 luminaries corresponded to 7 heavens and 7 planetary spheres. Mithraic monuments, as well as the 7-branched lampstand in the temple, reflected this planetary system. Sources like Clemens of Alexandria and Philo Judaeus affirm that such symbols indeed stood for the celestial bodies, anchoring the spiritual teachings of old within the visible order of the universe. The ancient belief held that the soul, in order to return to its divine origin, must retrace the path of its descent through the celestial spheres. This ascent was symbolized by a ladder, which, according to Marsilius Ficinus in his commentary on Plotinus, had a series of distinct levels. In the Mysteries of Mithras, rites brought to Rome during the era of the emperors, this ladder, marked by a succession of stages, stood for the soul's journey through the regions ruled by the heavenly bodies. It was said that Jacob, in his vision, beheld divine spirits traveling upward and downward on such a ladder, with a divine presence watching from above. These Mithraic rites took place in subterranean chambers, where the structure of the heavens was reflected in their design. Gates were aligned with the key points of the zodiac, the equinoxes and solstices, and the journey of the soul was imagined as passing through a sequence of celestial zones. Each region, linked to a planetary influence, had its own symbolic gate through which the soul moved, either descending into material existence or ascending toward the divine. Celsus, as quoted by Origen, tells us that this mystical path was depicted as a ladder spanning from the earthly realm to the heavens, divided into segments, each with a corresponding portal, and culminating in an ultimate gate at the highest level, the realm beyond the planets, where the fixed stars reside. This symbolism echoed older traditions, such as that embodied in the Tower of Borsippa near Babylon, a structure of several layers, each rendered in a different hue and each representing a level of the celestial ascent. In the Mithraic initiations, the candidate advanced through a series of demanding trials, each aligned with one of the planetary spheres. The ladder with its multiple rungs became the emblem of these successive phases of spiritual elevation. Within the lodge, what you see, its layout and symbolism, is revealed through its lights. These lights, as described by the tradition of the York Rite, are known as both the greater and the lesser. The Holy Scriptures, along with the square and compasses, are not only described as the chief lights, but also form what is referred to as the furniture of the lodge. It is said that no lodge is complete without them. At times, this requirement has been misused to exclude individuals of different faiths, particularly those who do not accept the New Testament as sacred. But the essential truth is this: the sacred text placed on the altar should always correspond to the candidate's own religion. Whether it be the Hebrew Torah in a Jewish lodge or the Quran in an Islamic one, the spiritual text, alongside the square and compasses, serves as the guiding light by which a Mason lives and works. The obligation taken during initiation is made upon the candidate's own holy book, so that it bears the deepest personal significance. This is why initiate's religious background was respectfully inquired about. Our interest, Pike writes, goes no further than to ensure the solemnity of your oath. The square, one of the great emblems of the craft, is formed by the union of 2 straight lines at a right angle. Its use applies to flat surfaces, and it belongs to the realm of geometry, the science of measuring the earth. It signifies the order, proportion, and truth of the material world, in contrast to the more ethereal symbolism found in the upward journey of the soul. The compass, with its function of drawing circles, is linked to the celestial and the infinite, to the science of the stars and the heavens. It represents the spiritual and the soul, just as the square, with its focus on angles and flat surfaces, pertains to the earthly and the bodily. Yet, the compass is not limited to celestial matters. It also has its place in the geometry of the earth, used to construct upright lines and right angles. This dual use serves as a reminder: even in matters that seem purely moral or civic, the spiritual is never absent. The earthly and the divine are always interwoven, and within the simplest responsibilities of daily life, there lies a trace of the sacred. Nations, too, are more than just political machines. They are also spiritual entities. A society that ignores this and seeks only material gain will find itself spiritually hollow. When people worship profit or tradition without depth, when memory and habit replace genuine inner vitality, that nation cannot guide the world forward. Whether lost in religious ritual or consumed by commerce, such a society dims its inner light, lowers its spiritual vision, and forfeits its role in the unfolding of a higher human purpose. A free society that forgets its soul may throw itself into the pursuit of material success. Its wars are fought not for ideals, but for economic advantage. The citizens follow this example, aspiring not to wisdom or virtue, but to wealth, status, and indulgence. In such a culture, riches may multiply, but they are hoarded by a few. Luxury and suffering become unequally divided. Comfort and pleasure are reserved for the privileged, while hardship and deprivation fall to the many. Labor, instead of being a source of dignity, becomes a source of oppression. From the fields and factories to the mines and workshops, human beings are turned into instruments of production, their misery fueling the power of the state. This builds a nation strong in appearance but hollow in moral foundation, a grandeur resting on the suffering of individuals. If a nation, like a celestial body, can pass through a time of darkness, that darkness should be temporary. An eclipse should be followed by light, not fall into permanent night. There is also a mention of the lesser or symbolic lights, the sun, the moon, and the master of the lodge. Their meanings are spoken of in the York Rite, but their role is symbolic. They do not truly illuminate the lodge, except in what they represent. The deeper meanings of these symbols are often left unexplained. For instance, the moon does not govern the night in any literal or orderly fashion. The sun has long been regarded as the ancient emblem of the creative and life-giving force of the divine. Light, for the ancients, was the origin of all life, and the divine was seen as the very source and essence of that light, an unseen fire expressing itself as visible brilliance. The sun was seen as the manifestation of this hidden divinity, and those who venerated the light god appeared to worship the sun itself as the closest representation of the divine force. The moon, in contrast, symbolized the receptive power of nature, the feminine principle that responds to and is made fertile by the generative force of the sun. Thus, the moon represented goddesses such as Isis, Astarte, and Artemis. Above these dual principles stood the Master of Life, the supreme divinity expressing itself through both. In various cultures, this divine figure appeared in different forms. Zeus, the sovereign god among the Greeks, Horus, born of Osiris and Isis in Egypt, Dionysus and Mithras, each seen as bringers of light, life, and truth. The Master and the Wardens in every lodge symbolically represent the sun, the moon, and the divine force that grants life and light. It is the Master's role to share that light with the brethren, both directly and through the Wardens, who serve as his emissaries. This duty echoes the vision offered by the prophet Isaiah, where he speaks of a time when the sun shall never set, nor the moon fade, because the divine presence itself becomes an eternal light, ending all mourning. A society shaped by such light, where righteousness prevails and the people inherit the land in harmony, is the ideal of a truly free nation. Among the ancient northern peoples, a similar trinity of divinity was venerated: Odin, the All-Father and sovereign force; Freya, his consort, a symbol of the universal material realm; and Thor, the sun and reconciler. Yet beyond them all was recognized a higher, ultimate deity, a being unchanging and eternal, origin of all things, alive and terrible in majesty, who knows the hidden and searches the depths. At Eleusis, the temple that symbolized the cosmos through its singular overhead opening, representations of the sun, moon, and Mercury were placed, embodying the celestial forces. As the scholar Delaunay explains, these luminaries symbolized the generative forces, active and receptive, male and female. The sun stood for the forceful light, casting his vital rays upon the moon. Their union brings forth a third light, the blazing star or Horus, representing the offspring of this sacred union. Together, they form a perfect triangle, within which shines the ineffable letter of the Kabbalists, said to have called all creation into being. The lodge is adorned with certain symbols, including the mosaic pavement, the indented border, and the central blazing star. The checkered pavement, composed of dark and light tiles, is believed to represent the floor of Solomon's temple, while the indented border, or tessel, is seen as the elegant frame encircling it. The blazing star is held to be a symbol of divine guidance, recalling the celestial sign that led the wise men to the birthplace of the Redeemer. Yet, historically, there is no proof that Solomon's temple featured such a pavement or border. Its floor was made of fir, and its walls panelled in cedar. In older English practice, the tracing board, rather than the pavement itself, was bordered with an indented frame, a design more prevalent in America today. The tesserae, properly speaking, are the black and white shapes that form the pavement. In England, this border, sometimes called tessellated, bears 4 tassels, traditionally signifying the virtues of temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice. Though often misnamed, the correct understanding is that it is a patterned pavement with a serrated edge. The alternation of black and white symbolizes the dualities inherent in existence: light and darkness, good and evil, liberty and tyranny. It reflects age-old myths of cosmic struggle: Michael against the adversary, divine beings battling giants, Balder contending with Loki. It evokes the tension between the brightness of day and the shadow of night, between the voice of individual conscience and the oppressive weight of institutions that speak in place of the soul, asserting dogmas and infallibility where once there was freedom. The pavement, when laid in lozenge shapes, naturally takes on a jagged, saw-like edge, what is often called an indented or denticulate form. To visually complete it, a bordering is applied, typically adorned at the corners with tassels. If one attempts to assign these tassels or the bordering a deeper symbolic significance, it is a matter more of imagination than of established meaning. Similarly, interpreting the 5-pointed blazing star as a symbol of divine providence or associating it with the guiding star of the Magi is a relatively modern interpretation and not grounded in its original symbolism. In its earliest form, the star stood for Sirius, the dog star, which heralded the rising of the Nile and was sacred to Anubis, the divine guide who accompanied Isis in her search for Osiris, her brother and consort. Later, the symbol came to represent Horus, the son of Osiris and Isis. Osiris himself was aligned with the sun and the cycle of the seasons, seen as the deity of time. Horus, born of Isis, who embodied universal nature, was considered the first form of matter, the eternal source of all life, the living spark of divine fire, and the generative essence of all beings. The blazing star also represented Hermes, the god of learning, known in Greek as Mercury. It evolved into the mystical symbol of the Magi, the pentalpha, a 5-pointed figure that came to represent liberty, standing bright and constant amid the turbulence of change, like a herald of peace and prosperity after the chaos of revolutions. In the east of the lodge, above the master's station, this star is often encased in a triangle, within which rests the Hebrew letter Yod. In English and American lodges, this is frequently replaced with the letter G, presumed to stand for God, much as one might use the letter D for Jew in French. However, this substitution lacks symbolic depth. The original character, Yod, holds a central place in the Kabbalistic tradition. It symbolizes unity and the supreme, unmanifest deity. It is the first letter of the sacred name, and also represents the great triads of the Kabbalah. To uncover its full mystical significance, one must turn to the ancient Kabbalistic texts like the Sohar and the Sifra d'Ziniatha, and explore their profound teachings. Suffice it to say, Yod signifies the creative force of the divine, depicted as a single point at the center of the boundless circle of existence. In this degree, that point, Yod, becomes a symbol of the absolute, the nameless and unknowable source of all being. In French Masonic tradition, Yod is placed at the center of the blazing star. Ancient English Masonic lectures also described the blazing star or glory at the center as a reference to the sun, which lights the earth and blesses mankind with its warmth. They also associated it with prudence. In its original sense, prudence, prudentia, means foresight, and the blazing star has thus also come to signify omniscience, or the all-seeing eye, which for Egyptian initiates was the eye of Osiris, the divine creator. With Yod at its heart, the star embodies the Kabbalistic idea of divine energy, manifest as light, giving rise to the universe. Within the lodge, there are said to be 6 jewels. 3 of them are termed movable, and 3 immovable. Traditionally, the square, the level, and the plum were called movable jewels because they could be passed from one brother to another. The more recent habit of calling them immovable arises from the fact that they are always present in a functioning lodge. The remaining 3, the rough ashlar, the perfect ashlar or cubic stone, sometimes rendered as a double cube, and the tracing board or trestle board, are known as the immovable jewels. In the York tradition, the square is said to teach morality, the level to represent equality, and the plum to guide toward upright conduct. Further reflections on the immovable jewels are offered in their respective ritual texts. As Pike relates, our brethren of the York Rite explain that within every well-regulated lodge there is symbolized a point enclosed by a circle. The point stands for the individual brother, while the circle marks the boundary of his conduct, a limit he must never allow his prejudices or passions to cross. This, however, is not intended as a full interpretation of Masonic symbols. Some offer a deeper meaning, suggesting that the point within the circle represents God at the center of the universe. This symbol is an ancient Egyptian sign for the sun and Osiris, and remains the astronomical sign for the great luminary to this day. In Kabbalistic tradition, the point is known as Yod, the creative energy of God radiating light throughout the circular space, which the universal light left empty in order to create the worlds by withdrawing his essence from every side toward that single point. Pike further notes that these brethren add a detail. The circle is bordered by 2 parallel perpendicular lines, representing St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist, and resting atop is the Holy Scriptures, shown as an open book. They say that as one moves around the circle, these 2 lines and the Scriptures must be encountered, and as long as a Mason remains within the guidance of their teachings, it is impossible for him to seriously err. This point requires little commentary. Some have fancifully imagined the parallel lines as the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, touched by the sun at the solstices, but according to Pike, this is inaccurate, since the tropics are not perpendicular lines. If these lines were part of the ancient symbol, their meaning was undoubtedly more profound and meaningful, likely akin to that of the twin columns Jachin and Boaz. Such significance is reserved for the adept and can be explored within the Kabbalah. It reflects the balance between justice and mercy, with harmony arising from the perfect wisdom that governs both. The inclusion of the Holy Scriptures, like the terrestrial and celestial globes on the portico columns, is a modern addition that has somewhat altered the original symbol, similar to how the figure of Isis weeping over the broken column with Osiris's remains at Byblos was an added narrative. Masonry itself holds a kind of decalogue, a set of guiding commandments for its initiates, which can be summarized as follows. God is understood as the eternal, omnipotent, immutable wisdom, supreme intelligence, and boundless love. He is to be adored, revered, and loved, and honored by living virtuously. One's religion should be to do good because it brings joy, not merely out of duty, and one should seek to be a friend of the wise by following their teachings. The soul is immortal and must never be degraded. One must continually battle vice, treating others as one wishes to be treated, accepting one's fate with patience while keeping the light of wisdom burning. Respect is due to parents, the elderly, and the young, with a duty to protect innocence and nurture the young. Cherishing one's family and loving one's country, along with obedience to its laws, is essential. Friendship should be like a second self, with loyalty enduring through misfortune and honoring a friend's memory as if he was still alive. Insincere friendships must be avoided. moderation practiced in all things, and care taken not to bring shame upon oneself. Passions are never to dominate. The faults of others should serve as lessons, and errors met with indulgence. One should listen more than speak, act with integrity, forgive offenses, repay evil with good, and never misuse strength or position. The pursuit of knowledge about others helps one better understand oneself. Always seek virtue, practice justice, and avoid idleness. The central commandment of Masonry is this: "A new commandment I give you, that you love one another." Whoever claims to walk in the light, yet harbors hatred for his brother, remains in darkness. These are the essential moral obligations of a Mason. Beyond personal conduct, Masonry also embraces the responsibility of uplifting society's moral and intellectual condition, spreading knowledge, encouraging the circulation of ideas, nurturing youthful minds, and, through the gradual teaching of principles and the establishment of just laws, guiding humanity toward harmony with its destiny. This mission is the apprenticeship of every initiate. The initiate must not believe that his efforts are insignificant or become resigned to inaction out of despair. Just as in the daily trials of life, great achievements are often forged in small, unseen struggles. There is a quiet but resolute courage that stands firm, step by step, in the darkness, resisting the advance of necessity and moral decay. There are noble and secret victories without witnesses or acclaim, battles fought in hardship, isolation, and poverty, where heroes remain unknown, yet sometimes surpass those celebrated in history. A Mason should emulate this quiet bravery in opposing the forces of necessity and baseness that threaten not only individuals but entire nations. He must confront these challenges directly, even in obscurity, protesting against injustice, folly, usurpation, and the first encroachments of tyranny. Truth spoken with righteous indignation is the highest form of eloquence. It is far harder for a people to preserve their freedom than to win it. The voice of truth must constantly challenge the status quo, for there is an eternal quality in what is right. A Mason should serve as both priest and warrior for justice. If his country loses its liberties, he must not lose hope. The protest of justice against oppression endures beyond time. No length of occupation can legitimize the theft of freedom. A nation's identity cannot be erased by conquest any more than a city can be transformed into another. Though a people may endure subjugation and submit temporarily under pressure, once that pressure lifts, if they are worthy of freedom, they will rise again. History will judge tyranny as the murderer of its victims, but the spirit of liberty cannot be extinguished. Whatever happens, we must place our trust in the justice and supreme wisdom of God, nurture hope for what lies ahead, and extend compassion to those who stray in error. God reveals His will to humanity through events, like an obscure manuscript written in an arcane language. People rush to interpret it, often hastily, inaccurately, with many errors, omissions, and misunderstandings. Our vision is limited. We see but a small segment of the vast circle. Few possess the insight to grasp the divine language fully. Even the most discerning and patient unravel these mysterious signs slowly, and by the time their interpretation emerges, the moment may have passed. Meanwhile, countless other versions already circulate in the public realm. Usually the most flawed are the most popular. Each interpretation gives birth to a faction, and from every misunderstanding springs a party. Each claims or pretends to hold the only true meaning. Each faction insists it alone has the light. Furthermore, factions act like blind marksmen, shooting fiercely and skillfully wherever the defenders of truth display a weakness, where a lapse in logic or vulnerability exists. This explains why combating error among the masses often ends in frustration. Like Antaeus, who grew stronger when struck down by Hercules, falsehoods regenerate as quickly as they are challenged. It is foolish to believe that error, even when wounded, dies among its followers. Truth advances slowly. Error possesses an astonishing vitality. Truth often passes over the heads of the masses. If an error is temporarily subdued, it quickly rebounds, as vigorous as ever. Some of the most absurd and irrational errors are the longest enduring. Yet Masonry, being morality and philosophy, must never cease its work. We can never predict when success will come. Often it arrives unexpectedly, nor can we know the full impact of our efforts. Whether it prevails or fails, Masonry must never yield to error or surrender to discouragement. In ancient times, a handful of captured soldiers refused to submit to their conqueror, showing the magnanimity of their leader Hannibal. Masons, too, should possess such noble spirit. Masonry ought to be a living force, its purpose and power dedicated to the betterment of mankind. Socrates must inspire Adam, and through him bring forth a Marcus Aurelius. In other words, transform the man of pleasure into the man of wisdom. Masonry should never be merely a distant watchtower of mystery from which to observe the world idly, a mere curiosity for the inquisitive. It must offer the full cup of thought to those who thirst for knowledge, provide true understanding of the divine, and reconcile conscience with science. Philosophy holds this task, and morality is faith flourishing fully. Reflection must lead to action, the absolute must be practical, the ideal must become nourishment for the human spirit, air, food, and drink for the mind. Wisdom is a sacred union. Only by this union does wisdom transcend sterile scientific love and become the supreme way to unite humanity and inspire united action. Philosophy thus becomes religion. Masonry, like history and philosophy, bears eternal yet simple duties: to oppose tyranny, injustice, cruelty, and corruption, embodied in figures such as Caiaphas as bishop, Draco or Jeffreys as judges, Trimalchion as legislator, and Tiberius as emperor. These stand as symbols of oppression that crush the human spirit and corruption that pollutes and corrupts society. In the writings created for the guidance of the craft, it is stated that the three fundamental principles of a Mason's calling are brotherly love, relief, and truth. It is indeed essential that a spirit of brotherly affection and kindness governs all interactions and relationships among fellow brethren. Equally, a broad and generous philanthropy should inspire a Mason's conduct toward all people. The duty to assist those in distress is especially incumbent upon Masons, a solemn responsibility that must never be ignored, delayed, or performed with indifference or insufficiency. It is also a fundamental truth that truth itself is a divine quality and the basis of all virtue. To live honestly and to earnestly seek and understand the truth are the chief aims of every sincere Mason. Following the tradition of the ancients, Masonry honors temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice as the four cardinal virtues. These virtues are as vital to nations as they are to individuals. A people wishing to be free and independent must embody wisdom, foresight, prudent caution, and careful judgment, all qualities encompassed within prudence. Such a nation must exercise moderation in asserting its rights and in its deliberations, manage its resources with care, and be bold and courageous. It must endure hardship without despair, remaining patient and resolute even in the face of adversity, much like a great republic that perseveres despite devastating defeats and setbacks. No catastrophe or military disaster should dishearten her spirit or cause her to falter. Above all, she must uphold justice, never yielding to the powerful at the expense of the weak, always conducting herself fairly with all peoples, from the greatest nations to the smallest tribes. Her faith must be unwavering, her laws honest, and her dealings upright. Whenever such a republic exists, it will endure forever. For it is rashness, injustice, excess in times of prosperity, and despair with chaos in times of misfortune that bring about the ruin and downfall of nations.